Well, welcome to the financial analysis framework to accelerate IT modernization through the hybrid cloud. As Jason said, my name is Tim McCallum. I'm the Director of Customer Success Finance here at Nutanix, and we have some exciting material for you today. But I'd like to start out with what I consider probably my favorite retail story. And this is really a story about two of my sons, Matthew and Michael, and they could not be any more different than you can imagine. Matthew is an incredible sports fanatic. He's absolutely into football. And Michael is absolutely not. And one day came when we were deciding to go to a football game as a family. And Michael came to me and said, "Dad, do you know how long a football game is?" And I said, "Well, Michael, I'll tell you what. Why don't we go to a bookstore while Matthew and Mom go to the game, and then we'll meet up at halftime and we'll all enjoy the game as a family." And this was an acceptable answer. But when we get to the bookstore, when we get to this game, Mom and Matthew went off to the game and we went to a bookstore, and I had an experience that is like no other in my retail life. Michael walks up to a clerk and said, "Hey, do you have the latest Batman book?" And he pulls out his iPhone and he starts looking at his iPhone and he says, "Yes, I do. I have 3 of those over here in aisle 2." And I said, "Do you have Where's Waldo?" It's kind of reliving a little bit of my childhood, I suppose. "Where's Waldo?" And he looks at his phone. He goes, "Yeah, I've got a couple of those here over on aisle 9." And we walk over to those. And then I look around and I don't see any registers in the store. I'm like, "How do I buy this?" And he goes, "Oh, this lady over here can help you out." And she pulls out an iPad and she scans the barcode with the camera on it. And she swipes my credit card. And immediately she said, "Welcome to our store, Mr. McCallum. I see you are part of our online bookstore. And we have found these books online for less cost. And so we have automatically uh, updated our sales system so that it reflects those matched costs. So this is not a mistake. We just want to make sure you know." And I know that by the time she said, "Thank you for coming into our store, Mr. McCallum," that their inventory was already updated on all these iPads. And we walk out of the store, Michael and I do, and I said, "Michael," I said, "did you see that? This is what I'm talking about all the time. They have really brought me into their store and connected my online experience with my brick and mortar experience in their store. They have really brought this all together." Now, Michael honestly kind of looked at me and said, "Well, I don't know." And he goes, "I got a Batman book out of it, so that works for me." But to actually accomplish this store had to really engage their applications. They had to really go into their development. They had to put all of this integrated between online and integrated in their store, all in the hands of a mobile device within their associates. And in working with some of these development groups, I've been told that by one of them that if their developer needed more than 20 minutes for a VM, then it's too long. And sadly, many of our current IT organizations, they're requiring weeks and even to months to get their VM. Now, why is this the case? It really comes down to that we are running on a 30-year-old legacy model for our data centers. This is where we have SANs, we have storage, we have servers that are all part of this. This starts to create this entire silos of technology and these complexities, which really become where 70% of our IT budgets are starting to be seen as keeping the lights on. And they're not going into driving innovation. They're not going into really meeting the business needs. And that's where IT has kind of become more order takers than innovation centers. Now, the simplicity that we're after is really what Nutanix will bring. And this is where this tweet from Mustafa Cahill captures so well that we have the storage and implementation guide for vSphere 6. He was very proud that this would be in about 1,242 pages in one volume. this becomes an 18-page tech note within a Nutanix Enterprise Cloud platform architecture. So with this, why don't I pause? And Jason, I think you have our first polling question for everybody. This is, when you need funds for and initiatives, what do you require?
Yes, indeed. So we're going to launch this, folks. And this is obviously geared more towards the security area. But when you need funds for a security initiative, what do you require? Option 1, nothing. My request is good enough. Option 2, a detailed internal ROI or TCO analysis. Option 3, an external or externally vetted financial analysis. Or option 4, finance never approves our IT projects. I'm going to let this run a little bit further, allows many people to participate as possible. Please, everybody take the time if you can to participate, always helps. Let's go for another 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, fantastic. Overwhelming results there. Tim, a detailed internal ROI or TCO analysis, 94% of the people that voted.
Great. I think that's I'm absolutely thrilled to see that 94% would be looking for a detailed internal ROI or TCO analysis. Correct. That's what we would recommend, is a fully detailed analysis of these. Now, when I joined Nutanix, this was our marketing. It was the no sand symbol. And back then, every single data center manufacturer just really scoffed at this notion of running serious applications on software rather than on proprietary SANs. But what's interesting is today, they are all offering their own HCI solutions. Spring article in 2020 from SiliconANGLE really captured this, and it said, the days of selling storage controllers that mask the deficiencies of spinning disk or add embedded hardware functions, those days are gone. Even VMware, that is 85% owned by Dell EMC, tweeted earlier this year, it is nearly impossible to satisfy real-time business needs with a traditional 3-tier infrastructure. So why do we keep using these? Why are we still in a 3-tier world? And this is because we're oftentimes stuck in a repetitive, complex infrastructure cycle. And that being stuck in that cycle is allowing us to miss a lot of opportunities to adopt new technologies that drive our businesses forward, and in many cases will actually keep our businesses viable into the future. Now, Retail CIO Connect 2021 has actually recognized a lot of these complexities and a lot of these as their largest challenges in the article, The 5 Biggest Challenges Facing Retail CIOs. They're looking at, how do we get a handle on the large amounts of data? How do we look at breaking down these technology silos within our organization to streamline efficiencies, managing risk, and to be able to have real-time engagement? And how do we get our organizations to embrace technology and the technological change that comes around it? So the technology that Nutanix pioneered has become known as hyperconverged infrastructure, or HCI in short. And this has certainly become mainstream. IDC has found that HCI sales were over $8.5 billion this last year, and projects almost $13 billion in the next 3 years. So it's very clear that HCI is become a mainstream standard. In fact, Nutanix not long ago went public, and they joined this billion-dollar ranks itself as a company. So how do some of these companies really change? And I think this is captured well in a story with Valpak. Valpak relies solely on automation and robotics to deliver high volume at a lower cost. And initially, Valpak entered into Nutanix Enterprise Cloud really to reduce out their storage costs and to quickly be able to see savings. Now, what they found was even beyond what they were anticipating. They found that they accelerated their deployments by 10 times compared to what they were doing before. They found 8x improvements in the performance of their databases running on the same hardware. They were just able to move faster because they were not leaving to go to these proprietary SANs. They were able to cut their management time from 180 hours down to 2 hours per month. And I think Chris Kate, who is the Executive Vice President CIO, captured it really from their business perspective when he said, from a speed to market perspective, Nutanix allows us to roll out and expand our technology footprint in a very easy and quick way versus having these massive infrastructure projects that are slow and take over a year to complete. This is the agility that Valpak was able to realize, even though they were looking initially at just their storage cost. So Nutanix recently has issued its third annual Enterprise Cloud Index study. This is a report compiled by a research organization, Vance & Bourne, and it surveyed over 3,400 IT decision makers from across the globe. And they found some interesting findings. So they found 46% of the respondents said they increased their hybrid cloud investments as a direct result of the pandemic. And 86% of the respondents really felt that the hybrid cloud is their ideal operating model. Further, 76% reported that the pandemic has caused IT to become viewed more strategically within their organizations. This is something that CIOs have long sought for within their organizations. Now, after I joined Nutanix, this was early on within Nutanix, I was fascinated by a lot of the security roots. Back before I had joined, it was a 60-person company, and one of the first customers was the U.S. Army intelligence training for officers at Fort Huachuca. And they really loved Nutanix as far as their technology, but they said we have to have it comply with DoD security networks, so that it has to be able to be certified in all these ways. And Nutanix had a choice. They were a young company, and they said, do we go into the expense of creating this as part of our core, or do we do what a lot of vendors do, and we start to sell the product out into the commercial world, and we bolt this on later? Well, they made a decision to go ahead and embed the security as part of their DNA into the core of their product. And this meant coming up with a list of hardening, which is known as a STIG. This is all of the pieces to harden an environment to a DoD level. Now, once they had that, they said, let's go one step further and let's get a second level STIG and let's automate all of that security hardening. And then somebody had a great idea. Why don't we go ahead and create it into a scheduler? So now you can schedule that your enterprise cloud will become automatically hardened. We're going to protect from any human error of accidentally leaving a loophole open or leaving some attack vector open, and be able to harden this. Now, Eric Shepard recently of IDC told VentureBeat magazine last March that hyperconverged systems are becoming the backbone of the hybrid and the multi-cloud world. And this is certainly true for Nutanix, whose built-in HCI security features and functions serve to lower the complexity as the foundation of both the private and multi-clouds. So this is becoming recognized as a very secure platform. But for nearly all of our IT organizations, a lot of what we really need is we need to get into the automation and innovation of technologies, and we need to disrupt using that. But how do we know which technology to really use or which one to deploy? And we found that a lot of organizations, if they're using an informal process to evaluate the disruptive technology, that it oftentimes does not work very well. There's a lot of biases that come into play. There's a lot of personal agendas, personal branding around the technologies, or maybe even just simple as an IT administrator is looking to retire within the year. They just don't want to go learn something that is new. And these hold back a lot of the innovation. To give a little bit of an example of one of the that we ran into early on or in the mid 2000s, this was around VMware. VMware was already a mainstream. It was used across the globe. vMotion had been out for over a year and a half. And we'd come into IT organizations and we get the first objection would be, you will never put my production server on a virtual machine. And this type of bias was based on what had historically been done, and it pushed against the innovation of virtualization, and it slowed down a lot of IT, definitely for sure. But if you think about from their position, if you came up through the three-tier world, up through the physical servers and the applications, it was a little like rolling back in time, rolling back to somebody around 1980 and who's standing out in front of a hotel trying to hail a cab in a rainstorm and saying, hey, look, in the future, you'll be able to sit in the lobby of the hotel. You'll be able to pull out your smartphone. You'll be able to order an Uber or a Lyft or some other form of taxi just by touching your screen, and they'll come to you. The person would look at you and they just simply lack any of the context about what you're referring to. And this is oftentimes what it is when we're starting to talk about emerging IT trends. Gartner, who is in the business of predicting IT trends, saw what was happening to virtualization in the public cloud space years ago. And about 4 years ago, they retired the Magic Quadrant of virtualization. Now, while most public and hybrid cloud providers still support the standalone commercial hypervisors, nearly all of them have replaced this with an option for a Linux-based hypervisor, something of their own. And in these, there is no management tier. It's simple. Its setup is simple. The configuration becomes simple. There's no longer, how do I figure out how to make it redundant and scalable? And compared with a lot of these legacy hypervisors, there's almost no certifications that are required to be able to be proficient with it. They're just resilient, scalable, secure, and they're just there. So conducting a financial analysis really helps shed a light on these status quo biases and on these type of areas, and to really help business leaders focus on an objective results and make a better technology choice for the organizations. Recently, Enterprise Network Planning ran the best server virtualization software of 2021, and it included a glowing Nutanix AHV portion that said that AHV does away with the model that views virtualization as a complex layer within the IT stack that is licensed, deployed, and managed separately. But unfortunately, sadly, many organizations, they're still running on physical servers, which are extremely expensive to rack, to power, to cool. And they also pose security risk and require IT to spend a lot of time patching and upgrading them. Nutanix makes all of these physical servers, physical and virtual servers, very simplistic to move in. There's no SAN networks, there's no SAN or storage, storage administrators, server virtualization, and virtualization admins. They're just really P2V, and you go forward. Now, there's some stories I like to tell, and it's just because I really just love the stories. And this is one of those. I was working with a customer who's a director in IT in a grocery store chain who decided to leverage the financial analysis to overcome a lot of the objections and to really be able to look at AHV. And in his store, I kind of asked him a simple question of what was most important to him. And his his answer was quite interesting. He said, I care most about branding. And he goes, in my stores, I lack any form of protection. If I lose a server, it's usually down for several hours, and our dining areas, cash registers go down, those go offline, check cashing services go offline, our customer service goes offline, and we have to send everybody forward to the front cash registers, which are going to be run just locally within that register. And this gives a bad impression of our stores, and our customers often will go to the other competitors. So we sat down, we calculated out how often he has store outages, how often these things happen, what the cost of each of these solutions were. And this gave him an ability to really go back to his leadership and say, here is the financial impact to our business for not considering change into the virtualized world and into an enterprise cloud platform with Nutanix. So Jason, I think we have our second poll question here, if you will.
Yes, indeed, sir. So here you go, folks. Second poll of the session. How virtualized is your organization? Pretty straightforward question. How virtualized is your organization? 100% of x86 servers that can be virtualized are virtualized. We're 80% to 100% virtualized, or we have a long way to go. So let's leave this up there for another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and end. Last minute, second entry there, good stuff. And there you go, Tim. Option B, we're 80% to 100% virtualized. Clear winner.
Yeah, that is great. I've been actually really thrilled with the poll question so far today. We run into a lot of organizations that are not as virtualized as what you have here. So this is wonderful to see the 80% to 100% virtualized. Hopefully this is closer to the 100%. So, but it's wonderful to see. And it seems like there's a few with some long ways to go. And certainly, you know, I encourage you to be running through a lot of the analysis around those. Now, there's a lot of things that have changed around the pandemic. A lot of things around the working from home is one of the big things. In December 15th, 2020, a Gartner survey found that 90% of human resources leaders are going to allow employees to work remotely at least part of the time after the pandemic ends. But work from anywhere poses just a lot more security issues, a lot more challenges around agility, around flexibility. And this is because essentially the organizations are extending their networks into somebody's home, into areas that they do not have full control. So this enables infected devices to spread to the network. It also loses visibility of IT traffic for a lot of these remote users. However, when those corporations that are working from home using VDI or desktop as a service solutions, they can mitigate a lot of these issues and give users fresh desktops every single time they log in. This becomes quite a solution for them. I like to share a story, and this is a story of working with Steve. He was IT manager of a very, very large business. And this was what we refer to, it's kind of a special type of analysis. This is what we refer to as a look back analysis. And I asked Steve, I said, what was one of the significant things that you found after moving to Nutanix from your legacy 3-tier? And his answer kind of stunned me in a good way, but it kind of stunned me. Steve said, I was able to move 1,500 people off-site in response to COVID in just a few days. I could not have ever done that without our enterprise cloud being on Nutanix. The agility allowed me to split our clouds, use other servers that were not configured for VDI as a stopgap, and then replace them seamlessly without anyone knowing that we were swapping out hardware. And I could not have done this without the agility and the flexibility of Nutanix. It would have cost me at least 180 full-time people being at home for 6 weeks without any ability to do their work. This is the flexibility that became the backbone of a lot of what Steve was looking at as the value and the benefit within his environment is he could respond to the business and things that were not foreseen, things that are so remotely not foreseen as the COVID. Another case study is the Home Depot. The Home Depot in 2015, they challenged themselves to just revolutionize their IT. And up until that point, the Home Depot would try to cut costs by upgrading faster servers, by getting more efficient storage. But they looked at everything, they said, we have to do things differently. We have to look at how do we really go in and just change everything. And they started to look at HCI options, and they chose Nutanix. Now, they also did a look back. They did an initial study ahead of this, and then they came back after a year and said, let's validate this. Did this actually make a difference in our environment? And what they found when they're looking at the actuals versus the projected cost is that this was all reinforced in the validation, the realization of these savings were reinforced. They found that they did have a reduction of total cost of ownership. Their provisioning time went from 3 weeks to a single hour to provision. They enabled the ability to accurately do capacity management, and all of those technology silos that they were being hindered with were removed. In fact, Kevin Priest, the senior director at the Home Depot, was quoted saying, Nutanix not only converges technology, their software has enabled us to converge infrastructure teams and opportunities by combining IT specialists into a single operations group. We can now see our end-to-end environment work collaboratively and make better decisions for the business. About 5 years later now, Nutanix is nearly 100% operating on a Nutanix cloud platform. Dokrimum was founded in 1947, and it's the longest serving fashion company in Korea. They actually played a crucial role in establishing the Korean fashion industry with prominent brands like L Sport and L Golf. And they run over 400 brick and mortar stores. Now, Dokrimum found several key benefits within the enterprise cloud with Nutanix. They found higher availability. That they have also found a 2x reduced failover when there is a hardware failure, 60% improved infrastructure management, and 40% reduction in total cost. Within their ERP, they had a 3 times improvement in performance. And this list goes on and on. But one of the greatest benefits that they really found was that they were able to free up their critical IT staff from doing the lights on and maintaining just the lights on, and were able to focus them into all of the higher value strategic initiatives that would carry their business forward. Now, public cloud, of course, has been in the space a bit, and they have a tremendous momentum. AWS alone is a $50 billion run rate. The momentum of this is really been combined between a deep frustration from the businesses around the 3-tier, the legacy type infrastructures, and a lot of pressure to move and shift to the public cloud. And in a lot of our conversations around the globe, we'll be told all the time, we have a cloud first policy. And really, as analysts, we take a step back and we say, kind of simply, why? What went into that decision? What kind of analysis? And we'll hear all sorts of answers. We'll hear answers like, the board tells me to do this. My CIO has told me to do this. And one of the ones that we'll hear all the time is, we want to save money, or we want to get out of the data center business. but rarely are we really doing any analysis around these. And rarely do we find a lot of reasoning that really shows that these are cloud smart decisions for our businesses. And in fact, it turns out that public cloud is expensive. It is at least expensive for predictable workloads, which just so happen to make up the majority of this. And this is because we're talking about a rent versus a buy of your cloud infrastructures. The Flexera 2020 State of the Cloud report found that 82% of organizations struggle with managing the cloud cost spend and are over budget by an average of 23%. McKinsey backs this up in their November 2020 report, finding that 80% of enterprises consider managing cloud spend a challenge. And the IDG State of IT Modernization 2020 report, the one that we're showing here, says that 7 in 10 organizations have experienced higher than expected cloud costs. So in addition to the high cost of running these predictable workloads in a public cloud, there's several other challenges. There's oftentimes organizations will underestimate the cost of migrating into the public cloud, the cost of the lift and shift and refactoring that goes into the public cloud. And they'll oftentimes really emphasize or overestimate their success in being able to migrate their applications into the public cloud. So these become where we're paying for both our legacy data centers and at the same time for the high cost of renting the public cloud. And we have to manage both. In addition, IDG report that we mentioned earlier found that 49% of the public cloud is struggling to manage security. Of course, the leading cloud providers, they're going to manage the security, invest in their own security, but they're not responsible for your application security and for the internal policies and processes. And these are very different between public cloud and a private cloud. The public cloud ends up with a much broader attack vector where simple mistakes can be really disastrous. A prime example is the Capital One's $100 million record breach that really all stemmed from just a misconfigured server. So Steve Kaplan, he wrote an article in Forbes last year that was using a formal financial analysis framework that was not only to really kind of break through the status quo and the confirmation biases, but also to help alleviate a lot of the pressure to just lift and shift into the public cloud. Instead, it's looking at how do you do analysis to really optimize into a cloud smart strategy and putting the right workloads into the public cloud and keeping the right workloads into a private cloud or even into multi-clouds. Tuan Nicholson of United Network for Organ Sharing said, it becomes really about finding a balance between being on-prem and in the cloud. Nutanix gives us the best of both worlds. We have the cloud-like scalability, manageability, and flexibility on-prem, but we can convert to the cloud for workloads when necessary. Now, studies show that security is not only the biggest challenge of on-prem in public clouds, but it also impacts hybrid cloud environments. Anytime you have to do anything manual, either in public or private or hybrid cloud, it's kind of a disaster waiting to happen. And so more than a third of the Cloud Index respondents said that they were short on the skills needed to match or to manage a private and public cloud in cloud environments. And Nutanix, it allows you to use the same tool sets, skill sets, operating models, and even often the same security policies for both environments. And for most workloads, Nutanix actually can lower the cost of public cloud compared to your cloud native. So this becomes where we start a new discipline. And the new discipline is really using analysis to understand when should we be in a public cloud, when do we have the elasticity, things like the Cyber Monday or a Black Friday, when do we need to be, when are we going to have the bursting that we need to be in the public cloud compared to the run rate, the 70% that would be run rate that would be better off in an enterprise cloud? And how do we go between the two of them without needing to change our processes and our disciplines? I'll give you an example of one. I was working with e-commerce vendor, and this was Rahish. And what he was really looking at was, I want to be able to run in a hybrid cloud. I want to be able to have the Nutanix Enterprise Cloud on-prem. I'm going to be in a hybrid cloud with a public cloud. And I want to be able to understand the costs and the benefits of being able to do both. So what we did is we said, Rahish, why don't we do these initially as pure plays, everything in all of them, and then we'll start to blend them together into a hybrid solution. And so we found what we typically find was he was going to be able to save a significant amount by going into an enterprise cloud. The public cloud fell into a significant cost higher, which is what we would expect when we're renting it. But we're able to come back and say, Rahish, based on your environment, we would be able to reduce your cost by about $5.6 million over the course of the time, and be able to get the flexibility and the agility that would be with 30% of these workloads in a native public cloud and 70% being more in your enterprise cloud, and the ability to start to move between these. This really allowed him to become more flexibility and become an innovation center for his company. So whenever possible, and this is one of those things that we really advocate, whenever possible, my team wants to uncover these business objectives and then map those IT initiatives to the disruptive technology, and to use analysis to really understand this and to be able to help propel IT along. With that, Jason, I think we have our final polling question.
Yes, we do. So final poll for today. How aligned is IT with the business? How aligned is IT with the business? First option, we work in lockstep all the time. Second option, we periodically interact to ensure IT is working in the same direction. Or number three, we are still waiting to get introduced to the business. Be interesting to see if anyone chooses number three here, Tim. Let this go for another 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so we're good. Nobody said option 3.
Nobody said option 3.
Yeah,
that's good.
Okay. 67% we periodically interact to ensure IT is working in the same direction.
This is really right in line with what we see. We see a lot of IT really wanting to, or still working to get a full seat at the table. And so we see about 2/3 of our IT organizations that we work with are just like you guys are. And it's really interesting to see that. But I'm glad that there's many that are lock in step with their businesses, and that nobody is trying to wait to find out where the business is. I'll leave you with one last thought. And this was during a VP offsite meeting. We met with Rajiv Ramaswamy, and we're looking at how it was going over the first 100 days as being CEO of Nutanix. And he really emphasized that companies typically are viewing Nutanix not really just as a vendor, but really much more as a partner and a strategic partner. And from my personal perspective, derived from 20 years in the industry, many of these years in IT, and over 5.5 years at Nutanix, I have to completely agree. I think that this is the goal is to really partner with our customers. And this is validated in part by the extraordinary net performance, net promoter score that is been over 90% ever since I've been here, and even beyond that, over 7 years since they've been measuring it. So my team of consultants would really love to look forward to working with you in any opportunity you may have, and to really become a partner with you. With that, I'll go ahead and open up the floor for any questions.
Thank you very much there, Tim. Greatly appreciated. I'll just leave Tim's email up there for everybody to be able to see whilst we tackle some questions here before the end of the session. So yes, few questions coming in. Harry is obviously been paying close attention to what's been going on. So first question was from the way Tim answered the first survey question results, did you expect a different response from the participants? I haven't had any issues driving new requests as long as I have ROI details to back the request.
So if I understand right, it's easy to drive new requests if we have ROI details to back.
Yeah, I mean, were you expecting something different in the results to that first question?
A little bit. I think the first question was how virtualized was our environment, or how?
No, it was
the
when you
ROI
need funds.
questions.
When you need funds for an initiative, what do you require exactly?
Yeah, I find a lot of organizations in a lot of different industries, they approach this first as technology. And a lot of IT organizations, and this kind of comes into a little bit of the feeling a little disconnected from the business itself. And what they do is they say, here's the technology we need, here's the push for the technology that we need. And the business is pushing back and saying, what does that really mean? What does it mean for us? What does it mean for the business? And they kind of get into this where they're talking two different languages, and they get a little bit struggled in that. I see that more often than I see really doing detailed ROIs.
Thank you very much. How do you handle mainframe workload within your enterprise cloud model?
Mainframe workload, that's if we're actually on full mainframe, that's probably going to be something that's a bit proprietary. I would bring in much more people who deal more in technology to talk about how do we convert to those. There's probably a lot of people who would be dealing much more on the technical side of that one compared to the financial side that I deal with.
Got you. You showed the Valpak example, but over what timeline was this improvement gained? It sounds as though it was under a 1-year time frame, but was it staged or in a one-off implementation?
The Valpak, they staged it, or they started seeing those results nearly immediately. It was within, when they started to convert over, it was within a very short amount of time, within months, that they were seeing this. There were timelines that they spoke of, and I forget the exact timelines that it was. We can provide more details around the Valpak, but it was within a matter of really quickly, within weeks and a couple of months.
Final question here. Is your hybrid cloud all offsite or both on-site and offsite?
So Nutanix really is running more of a software. And so it runs on quite a few different server platforms within your on-site. It can run on AWS bare metal in a public cloud setting. So it becomes kind of your choice. Azure and GCP are coming very soon. As far as bare metal, we have joint workings to be able to run Nutanix in Azure here within the coming quarters. So it becomes really a matter of the same platform, the same clouded platform will stretch across all of these infrastructures.
Excellent. And then final before I close things off, is it possible to get a copy of the presentations and references for the documentation discussed during the presentations? Are we able to make this presentation or give a copy to the attendees, Tim?
I can provide a copy to the attendees of the presentation, and I can provide references to those that allowed us to use their name.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And everybody, obviously there will be an on-demand version of this, a recording made available as well. That brings us a close to the first session. So thank you very, very much, Tim. If everybody can just join me in a virtual round of applause.